Yeah, I felt to me like Alonso got his tactics wrong in this game, and it's not the first time he's done it against Bayern Munich this season. I can't help but feel like this is all kind of comes down to this kind of sense of almost like the fear creeping in with Leverkusen when they play Bayern Munich this season.
Mm.
We recently saw these two teams play at the Bayern Arena, obviously, which ended in a 0-0 draw, which people would have looked at on paper and thought, okay, yeah, Leverkusen not getting beaten by Bayern's a good result any day, but it was a game where, after the match, we talked about how Alonso went with that strikerless formation, and it was kind of a game that it kind of boiled down to Adley missing that one-on-one chance where, Patrick Schick would have been there. Same thing happened in this game. After Kane scored, Frimpong latches onto a loose ball and he can't get the ball past Manuel Neuer in the one-on-one. Now,
Mhm.
that's a great save from Manuel Neuer. I'm not taking that away from him, but a striker scores that goal. And Alonso is kind of determined to stick with this kind of strikerless formation, which often relies on Florian Wirtz playing up front on his own with someone like Adley and Grimaldo and Frimpong more or less just trying to like run up and down the pitch for 90 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just struggling to see why he keeps going back to this tactic, see how it works. Now, I know that I guess you could technically say he used it to beat Bayern in the Pokal, which they did knock them out of, so fair play. But it just I don't know. I keep going back to that kind of win. I think when when Alonso first arrived at Leverkusen, I think it was a 2-1 win in March 2023, maybe, I guess, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
and it was a game where Leverkusen really kind of presented themselves to the world and said, we're a team who feel like we can go toe to toe with Bayern Munich. We feel we have the quality to rival Bayern Munich, at least in one-on-one games. We'll see if we can do it over the course of the season. But in this match, and we saw it in the 2-2 game at the Allianz Arena as well, and then Leverkusen beat them 3-0 as well this time last year at the Bayern Arena.
Mm.
Last season and in the 6 months leading up to that, so the second half of the season before, Leverkusen played like a team who felt like they could match Bayern Munich, that they could challenge them, that they could beat them on their day. And this season, they play like a team who are just trying to mitigate losses. They're just trying to limit defensive blunders. They're trying to limit Bayern Munich's attacking threats. They're not kind of being proactive. They're being reactive to Bayern Munich's tactics. And it all kind of leads to this kind of sense of inferiority, or this sense that Bayer Leverkusen step out into the pitch, almost saying to themselves from the get go, we know we're not as good as Bayern Munich.
Mm.
And these tactics that Alonso keeps going with, where he doesn't even play a striker, and he's playing. I mean, tonight he played 6 defenders, 2 holding midfielders, and then Florian Wirtz and Adley were basically tasked with playing up front on their own. Um, And, you could argue about the tactics or the specific roles of each player and where Frimpong plays here and Grimaldo plays there. But at the end of the day, like, I just don't believe that Vincent Kompany and Bayern Munich don't look at a starting 11 and think, oh, this is absolutely fine. Do you not think Upamecano looks at that and think, I've got nothing to do today? I've got absolutely nothing to worry about if all I'm doing is chasing Florian Wirtz and Adley down and
Mm.
beating them to long balls or balls up the pitch. And we saw that. We saw Florian Wirtz come off the pitch, and him and Frimpong were arguing with each other on the substitute pitch because they were full of frustration. Because what are they expected to do? These guys found themselves in constant, 2 versus 4, 3 versus 4 situations where it's basically up to Wirtz to do something world class, do something that only like Lionel Messi can do, where he beats two
Yeah.
men and curls the ball into the far corner. And obviously it didn't pull off. And then when you add to that, Kovar's clanger, and then Musiala getting sent off, and Tabasova stepping onto the pitch and conceding a penalty about 10 seconds later, then it's obviously going to be a recipe for disaster. And you can't really mitigate for that, I suppose. But it just feels to me like these tactics that Alonso perseveres with this season just aren't working. And
Mm.
it's almost like it had set Leverkusen up for failure before, a ball had even been kicked tonight.
Yeah, I get the sense a little bit that he's overthinking it a little bit. It's a little bit of a lesson this year, isn't it, for Javier Alonso? And it maybe also shows that he's not maybe quite ready yet to leave Leverkusen for another club. I think that is something that we will have to discuss further down the road. I want to go to the team that actually won this match because I think they deserve the spotlight. We have been quite critical of Harry Kane on the show, and I think deservedly so. I'm not going to go and do revisionist history here. I think that Harry Kane has been at times pretty poor this year. I thought he was excellent today. I think this was the sort of game that Bayern Munich signed Harry Kane for and spent 100 million euros to get this sort of player. The header, the goal, right? I mean, could Kova have done better there? Probably, but he still gets on there. Michael Olise, the cross in the lead up to that is absolutely fantastic. But this is why you have a number 9 there to score these sort of goals. I thought Jamal Musiala, you wrote a newsletter this week saying this is these sort of games that he needs to step up. Done. He's done it. This was a performance that he needed to show that he can play on the stage. And I think when you contrast him and Wirtz, and for the first time it was about Musiala and not Wirtz, I think that was a big moment for him. The one player that really also stood out to me was Joshua Kimmich. I think he was brilliant at times today. The way he held together this midfield, the way he dictated play. And he did this on the loudest week of his Bayern Munich career, right? The week where he was supposed to commit. He hasn't committed yet. There's offers from other clubs. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? I wrote a big Q&A newsletter about this week. And he steps onto this pitch and delivers this sort of performance. I think that's outstanding. And then, Manuel Neuer has to come off and Jonas Ulrich comes on. And right away, you can see why Bayern signed him because he's a ball-playing goalkeeper. It's just like, it just feels like everything that Bayern Munich touched today kind of turned into gold. They had an outstanding performance. As bad as Leverkusen were, Bayern Munich were brilliant today, I think.